Hey guys, last video we talked about binding a bunch of events to one specific function. So we had a grid of buttons, let's say 0 to 9 here, and each time one of them get clicked, it would call the same function and the view would generate and tell us, hey, which one was it that got clicked, and so forth so on. But to do that, we needed to skip a thing I forgot to do before that video, which was, hey, how the hell does my code knows what I'm talking about in my design, right, in my activity? Okay, and to do that we need to do view binding. Why is it called view binding? Well, first of all, when you create an object, you usually use the keyword new, right? And that's perfect because we're creating objects. However, in this case of this part of the code, the backend code, and the view, the display, the UI, whatever you want to call it, it actually, these objects gets created beforehand, right? It gets created somewhere else by our resource, and all we're doing is saying, hey, this thing that's already connected, that's already created, just connect it to this part of the code, and this is done with the set content view. However, we don't have any real way of saying, hey, you do this, hey, you do that. So to do that, we need to go find view by IDs. Okay, there's this built-in function that belongs to the resources, and when we do that, we could find every specific view that we create. So why do we call these view? Because everything you see here, at some point, they're inheriting from view. So the view being the biggest parent. If you don't know about inheritance, you need to go check some videos out. But every one of them are inheriting by view, and they're getting added functionalities to it, right? So the view gives you a bunch of functionalities. So let's just see what we could get. So if I create a view right now, view, let's call it s equals new view, right? Good enough for me. Seems it requires something. Can I resolve constructor? So we need to give it the context, so just give it get application context, and that's perfectly fine. So by pressing s dot sorry, we see that all of these functionalities belong to the view. Okay, and let's say for the button, or I don't know, the edit text, they get all of this, and then they create a few more functionalities and a few more properties for themselves. Okay, because they're not going to recreate all of this for everything. If you notice, every event is going to have this on key down. So if we go on our display, so let's just delete this line for a second. If we go to our display, it should have this thing called on key down. Okay, and this is all inherited by my view, which is the parent. Now, so what now that we know that it exists, and now that we know that it belongs to the view, how do we bind them? And to bind them, we use this functionality called find view by ID. It's getting late, so I'm losing my speech recognition. Anyway, so this function find view by ID tells us, hey, go look inside the resources and find the specific view that we're looking for. So in this case, we're given an ID display field, which is a unique integer, but we don't really care about that. Now this will give me back a view, and all we got to do is say, hey, that view that you found, that should be an edit text, so we get the full functionality of an edit text. That view that you found, it needs to be a button, so we typecast it to a button, and we get the full functionality of a button. Okay, so this is how we bind everything. And notice a few things for all those beginners, so it makes sense to you guys. Everyone else, you could skip this part and just end the video. Inside my class, I created all my containers, or all my variables, outside. And you notice they're kind of null right now. You could just basically say there's something like this. They're null because that doesn't exist yet, or I don't know where it is, so I need to connect it, or I need to bind it to that specific location after everything is created and after everything is there, right? So after this is created and I set the content view to my resource layout activity main, this is the moment I could say, well, this display I created variable outside, it's actually this display on the layouts. And I left it outside so it's accessible to every other function. If I create it here, after this function finishes, anything created inside would also get burned to extension. Extension? There we go, whatever it's called. It will just get deleted, right? The scope of things. So this is why we created it outside. Now, in a later video, just to give you a future heads up, or if you want to make your life easier for this find view by ID, there is actually a, I don't know if you would say an extension, but there's this thing called Butterknife. And Butterknife, whole point is to make these bindings much easier or much intuitive. Okay, we'll do that in a different video. That's called Butterknife. If you want to look it up on yourself, it's pretty simple. You just have to do a bunch of editing and straight up, in my opinion. Anyway, cheers guys, see you around. Hopefully you understand this whole find view by IDs, but we'll play around with it as we come along and you'll understand more. Cheers.